The letter arrived on October 14th, 2025. It was 3 pages long. The first page was addressed to Raymond Halsey, 1840 County Road 12, Pickett County, Tennessee. The second page contained the notice. The third page was a remittance form for a refund of $17.42. The notice stated that Pacific Coastal Mutual Life Insurance Company, the original underwriter of policy number PC 4471-1985-H, had been acquired in 2021 by Sterling Heritage Acquisitions, LLC, a portfolio recovery firm based in Phoenix, Arizona. Sterling Heritage had completed a 40-month review of all inherited policies. Policy PC 4471-1985-H had been flagged for cancellation under Section 7B of the original underwriting agreement, a clause permitting termination upon material change in actuarial classification. The policy's face value was $400,000. It had been in force for 40 years. Raymond Halsey was 76 years old. He had paid into that policy every month, on the 11th of the month, since June of 1985. He had never missed a payment. The total of his contributions by his own arithmetic was $89,412. The refund offered was $17.42. He read the letter twice. He set it down on the kitchen table. He looked out the window at the field beyond the porch, where the late October light was already turning the grass gold. He didn't move for 11 minutes. Then he stood up, walked to the back bedroom, opened the closet, and took down the third box from the top shelf. His wife, Carol, had labeled it in 2003. The label, in her handwriting, read, Insurance, Pacific Coastal, 1985 to current. Carol had died in 2018, pancreatic cancer, 14 weeks from diagnosis to burial. She had been 71. For the last 3 weeks of her life, she had organized the entire filing system in their bedroom closet. 52 metal boxes covering 46 years of records, and had labeled every one of them in black marker by category, by year. Raymond had not opened the insurance box since she'd put it back on the shelf. He carried it to the kitchen table. He set it down next to the letter. He unlatched it. Inside were folders. 11 folders in chronological order, each labeled in Carol's handwriting. The first folder was labeled 1985, Original Policy. The last was labeled 2018, Final Renewal. Raymond was 76 years old. He had lived in Pickett County, Tennessee for 64 of those years. He had been born in 1949 in a town called Byrdstown, son of a tenant farmer named Ellis Halsey, and he had been drafted in 1969 at the age of 20. He had spent 14 months in Vietnam in the Central Highlands with the 4th Infantry Division. He had come home in 1971. He had been quieter than he left. He had wanted something permanent. In 1973, he bought 80 acres of pasture land for $9,400 on a 30-year note from an old farmer named Hollis Pruitt who had no children. The land was 3 miles south of Byrdstown on County Road 12. It had a creek along the western fence line and a stand of cedars on the north end. Raymond had paid the note off in 21 years. In 1985, he had taken out the life insurance policy. He had been 36 years old. Carol had been 33. They had 2 children, a son, Daniel, and a daughter, Margaret. Raymond had bought the policy because his own father had died at 58 with no insurance, and Raymond had spent his 20s watching his mother work 2 jobs to keep the rented house. He had made a quiet decision in a jungle clearing in 1970 that no wife of his and no child of his would ever go through what his mother had gone through. The policy was $400,000. The premium was $186 a month. He had paid it every month for 40 years. Carol had handled the renewals. Every 5 years there had been a renewal. She had filed them by year. She had kept the originals. Raymond opened the folder labeled 2010, Renewal. Inside was a single document, 2 pages, on Pacific Coastal Mutual letterhead, dated April 11, 2010. It was a renewal addendum, signed by an underwriter named Donald Vesper, and countersigned by Raymond and Carol Halsey. The addendum updated the policy for a new 5-year term. There was nothing remarkable about it. He opened the next folder. 2015, Renewal. Same document structure, different underwriter, 5-year term. Then, 2018, final renewal. Carol had labeled it that way because she had been dying when it came in. The renewal was dated March 3rd, 2018. She had been diagnosed in February. She had countersigned the document on March 5th, 2 days after it arrived, sitting at this same kitchen table. That had been the last document she ever filed. Raymond stared at the 2018 folder for a long time. Then he closed the box and called his lawyer. Stephen Voorhees was 68 years old, had practiced in Pickett County for 41 years, and had been Raymond's lawyer since 1989. Raymond drove the 17 miles into Byrdstown the next morning with the box in the passenger seat of his 2003 Chevy Silverado. Voorhees read the cancellation letter. He read it once, then again, slower this time. Raymond, I'm going to be honest with you. Section 7B clauses like this, they're real. Insurance companies put them in policies in the 1980s as fine print, and acquisition firms have been buying up old portfolios specifically to invoke them. I've seen 3 of these this year already. The dollar amounts are all in the same range. $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. They target policies with high accumulated value and no recent claim activity. What are my options? Honestly, limited. The 7B clause requires them to give 30 days notice and refund unearned premium. They've done both. The actuarial reclassification language is broad enough that they can almost always justify it. Unless we can find something in the policy that supersedes that clause, the cancellation is probably enforceable. Can I sue them? You can, but the firm, Sterling Heritage, they specialize in this. Their legal team is in Phoenix. They have 11 attorneys assigned to portfolio defense. The cost of a lawsuit would run you $40,000 minimum with no guarantee, and they know that. They count on people not being able to afford to fight. Raymond was quiet. Stephen, Carol kept everything. Every renewal, every addendum, every letter they ever sent. Bring me the box. Raymond brought the box in from the truck and set it on Voorhees' desk. Voorhees opened it. He started with the 1985 folder. He worked forward, year by year, document by document. It took him 2 hours and 40 minutes. Raymond sat across from him the entire time, drinking coffee that had gone cold, watching the lawyer's face. At 3:47 in the afternoon, Voorhees stopped on a single sheet of paper from the 1995 folder. He read it. Then again. Slower this time. He looked up. Raymond, when did you renew this policy in 1995? Carol handled it. I think it was August. Did you sign anything different that year? I signed whatever they sent. Voorhees turned the document around. It was 3 pages. The header read, Pacific Coastal Mutual, 10-year loyalty renewal, policy PC 4471. The first paragraph was standard. The second paragraph was standard. The third paragraph was where Voorhees pointed his finger. Read this one. Slow. Raymond put on his glasses. He read the paragraph. The paragraph stated that policyholders who had maintained continuous coverage for 10 years or longer, as of the date of execution, were eligible for the company's Heritage Loyalty designation. Once designated, the policy could not be terminated by the company under any circumstance other than non-payment, fraud, or the death of the insured. The designation was permanent. It transferred with any acquisition or sale of the underwriting entity. The clause concluded with a sentence in bold. Sections 7A through 7D of the original policy are expressly superseded by this designation and shall not apply to policies bearing the Heritage Loyalty seal. At the bottom of the page, embossed into the paper, was a small circular seal. The words around the edge read, Pacific Coastal Mutual Heritage Loyalty, 1995. Raymond looked up. Stephen! Raymond, this document supersedes the clause they're trying to use. In writing, embossed, countersigned by their underwriter and by you, in 1995. Will it hold up? It will hold up. The question is whether they know it exists. My guess is that when Sterling Heritage acquired the Pacific Coastal portfolio in 2021, they ran an algorithm against the original 1985 policy terms. They did not pull the 1995 renewal addenda. There were probably 400,000 policies in that portfolio. They couldn't have. They flagged every policy with a 7B clause and sent cancellation notices in batches. How many? I don't know, but you can't be the only one. Raymond was quiet for a moment. How long do I have? The cancellation takes effect November 14th. We have 31 days. I'll file an emergency motion in federal district court in Nashville next week. We'll request a temporary restraining order against Sterling Heritage based on the 1995 designation. If the judge grants it, and I believe she will, Sterling Heritage will have to defend the cancellation in open court. Will they settle? Almost certainly. But I want to make them appear in court first. I want this on the record. The motion was filed on October 22nd, 8 days after Raymond received the letter. The hearing was set for November 6th. The federal courthouse in Nashville was 3 hours from Byrdstown. Raymond drove up the night before and stayed in a hotel he had picked because the rate was $89. He woke at 4:30 in the morning. Carol had ironed the shirt for the hearing 7 years before she died. He had kept it in plastic, never worn it. He put it on at 6. The hearing was scheduled for 9. The courtroom was on the 4th floor, room 412. The judge was the Honorable Patricia Renner, 64 years old, 22 years on the federal bench. Sterling Heritage Acquisitions sent 3 attorneys. They arrived at 8:46. They wore identical dark suits. They carried identical leather portfolios. The lead attorney was named Marcus Feldon, 41 years old, partner at a firm in Phoenix, 15 years of insurance defense. He looked at Raymond once when he walked into the courtroom and did not look at him again. Voorhees sat next to Raymond. Carol's metal box sat on the table between them. Judge Renner entered at 9 sharp. She had read the filings. She nodded at both sides. Feldon stood first. He spoke for 19 minutes. He cited Section 7B of the original policy. He cited the actuarial reclassification. He cited 2 appellate decisions from the 9th Circuit affirming similar cancellations. He spoke smoothly. He used the phrase legacy underwriting artifact to describe the 1985 policy. He suggested that any addenda from the intervening period were either non-binding or had been rendered void by the 2021 acquisition. He sat down at 9:19. Voorhees stood. He spoke for 3 sentences. Your Honor, the policy in question was redesignated under the Pacific Coastal Mutual Heritage Loyalty Program on August 14, 1995. That designation expressly supersedes Section 7B. The document is embossed, countersigned, and was filed by my client's wife in chronological order with 38 other documents, all of which I have submitted as Exhibit A. He sat down. Judge Renner picked up the 1995 renewal document. She read it. The room was quiet. She turned to page 3. She looked at the embossed seal. She set the document down. She looked at Marcus Feldon. Counselor, did Sterling Heritage Acquisitions review the Heritage Loyalty Addenda when it acquired the Pacific Coastal portfolio in 2021? Feldon stood. He hesitated. He said something about the volume of documents in the portfolio. He said something about the standard review protocols. He did not answer the question. Judge Renner let him finish. Then she repeated it. Counselor, did your client review the 1995 addenda? Yes or no? Your Honor, we did not review every addendum on every policy. The portfolio contained approximately 412,000 policies. How many of those policies bore the Heritage Loyalty designation? I do not have that figure, Your Honor. I would suggest you obtain it, because every policy in your client's portfolio that bears that designation cannot be canceled under Section 7B. And if your client has issued cancellation notices to those policyholders, your client has done so in violation of the policy terms. The room went quiet. Judge Renner ruled from the bench. She granted the temporary restraining order. She vacated the cancellation of policy PC 4471-1985-H. She ordered Sterling Heritage to produce within 30 days a complete list of all Heritage Loyalty policies in the acquired portfolio and to file an affidavit under oath stating which of those policies had received cancellation notices. She set a follow-up hearing for January 12th. The hearing ended at 9:41. 41 minutes total. 8 days later, on November 14th, the same day his cancellation was supposed to take effect, Raymond received a letter from Sterling Heritage Acquisitions, LLC. The letter was 4 paragraphs long. It rescinded the cancellation. It restored the policy to active status. It refunded the $17.42. It offered, as a gesture of goodwill, a payment of $42,000 in compensation for the inconvenience. Voorhees called Raymond and read it to him over the phone. "They settled, Raymond. $42,000, tax-free. The policy stays in force. Sign and return." "What about the others?" "Judge Renner will see the affidavit on January 12th. If Sterling Heritage canceled other Heritage loyalty policies, and I suspect they did, those people will get their policies back too. Every one of them. And Sterling Heritage will be writing a lot of $42,000 checks." Raymond was quiet. "Sign it," Voorhees said. "Send it back. It's done." Raymond signed the settlement on the kitchen table that afternoon. He put it in the envelope Voorhees had sent. He drove it to the post office in Byrdstown and mailed it certified. Then he drove home. He carried the metal box back to the bedroom. He sat down on the edge of the bed where Carol had slept for 43 years. He opened the box. He took out the 1995 folder. He took out the renewal document. 3 pages, embossed seal, her signature in blue ink at the bottom of page 2. He looked at her signature for a long time. Then he refolded the document exactly the way she had folded it. He placed it back in the folder. He placed the folder back in the box, between 1990 and 2000, in chronological order the way she had organized it. He closed the latch. He carried the box back to the closet. He set it on the 3rd shelf from the top where it had been for 22 years. He closed the closet door. He walked back through the house. He poured himself a cup of coffee. He sat down at the kitchen table and looked out at the field beyond the porch, where the November light was low and gold over the cedars on the north end. Some men leave their families money. Some leave them land. Carol Halsey had left her husband a metal box with 11 folders in it, organized by year, labeled in black marker in chronological order. She had done it because she had known, the way good wives know, that someone would come for them eventually. She had not known when. She had not known who. She had only known that when they came, the proof would be where she had put it. And it was. The $42,000 from the settlement was nothing compared to that. The $400,000 in the policy was nothing compared to that. What Carol Halsey had given her husband was the certainty that he would never have to wonder, in the worst moment of his life, whether the paper he needed was somewhere in the house. It was. It always was. She had made sure. So tell me in the comments, would you have signed the settlement and walked away with the $42,000? Or would you have refused the goodwill payment and made Sterling Heritage face every Heritage loyalty policyholder in open court? There were thousands of them. The next story is one of them. A woman in Kentucky whose grandfather bought a policy in 1962 and whose granddaughter found something nobody at Sterling Heritage had ever seen. We'll see you there.